Hello, faithful, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most subjective 49ers discussion and analysis. And today, we're going to be discussing Deebo Samuel's recent trade request, what the impact on the salary cap could be, what his actual value could be via trade. We're going to be discussing other outside the organization players that may be available for trade that I know social media is really hot to acquire. We're going to be talking Gus Bradley joining the defensive staff. I'm going to be breaking down the existing players on the roster on offense, and we'll discuss position by position needs and what the Niners could potentially look to address in free agency with potentially their own free agents, outside free agents, and the draft. So let's get right into it. And on Super Bowl Sunday, the Niners did not want to be outdone by the Eagles and Chiefs. Deebo Samuel formally requests a trade, and there didn't seem to be any sort of bad blood or hostility with it. In a statement or a post by Adam Schefter, Deebo said that in his end-of-year exit interview with Kyle Shanahan, he had a difficult discussion with him because of how much he likes and respects Kyle. He had a great run in San Francisco, and he's very appreciative for that, but it's time, he thinks, to move on because that's in the best interest of Deebo. Now, just to get it out there and not to toot my own horn, but I've been saying that this was going to happen for 2 years. Since I started this podcast I started, I think, in 2022 before that season, but during the 2022 season or 2023 season, I was saying, they're going to trade him. The plan in my mind has come to fruition or come to realization, right? The plan was re-sign Ayuk to me and trade Deebo this offseason. If for no other reason, then he's on the last year of his contract, and San Francisco should try to acquire something of value for a player 29 going on 30, very physical play style, outside of the one great year, 1,400 receiving yards, another 300-400 rushing, all pro, first team all pro season. Hasn't been over 1,000 yards, hasn't been really close to 1,000 yards. And I thought, well, you can't pay two high price receivers. And I'm of the mantra, you can't pay too high priced anything of the same position. Linebackers, cornerbacks, defensive ends, receivers, safeties, D tackles. The salary cap it may allow it for the first year or two, but you're going to get crushed later on. You can only kick the can down the road for so long. Not even once, before Ayuk got paid. Again, 2022, 2023 season is what I was saying. Deebo's gone after the 2024 season. Doesn't really matter. You could bring me to Vegas or Atlantic City. I don't think this luck or prognostication is going to matter at all. And remember, just because Deebo requests a trade doesn't mean it's 100% going to happen. Now, I'd put it at 80, 85, 90%. I think I was of the opinion after the Ayuk injury that it opens the door for Deebo to stay. That if Ayuk is going to be rehabbing a torn ACL and MCL through at the earliest or the least through September, again, he's going to be on the PUP list. So, mid-October is going to be the best case scenario for Ayuk. Now, maybe he's a super fast healer and he's ready for the start of the season, but let's just be conservative and say he's not. Then it makes more sense to keep, in my mind, it made sense to keep Deebo, and there was an avenue to keep Deebo. But now I thought the Niners would be the ones pushing for the trade or thinking about it. The fact that it's coming from Deebo, I think it makes it easier for the organization to let him go. This isn't an organization being the bad guy thing. I don't think Deebo's being the bad guy. I think Deebo is wanting to get another opportunity because he knows he's not going to get another payday in San Francisco. His value is probably higher for San Francisco's offense, for Brock and the team, because of the Ayuk injury than what San Francisco may ultimately get in a trade. Because now with Deebo gone, you are down 2 of your top 3 receivers from last year to start the season, right? Or with Deebo going. He's not gone yet. And there's no rush. Requested a trade Super Bowl Sunday. He doesn't need to be traded today. Doesn't need to be traded in February. Could wait till March. Could wait till later. Could wait till after June 1st. I'm going to get into that now. So and I know a lot of you guys have done the research, if Deebo's traded before June 1st, the Niners take a $31.5 million dead cap hit. They take all their medicine now, essentially. What may speed up the time frame is that there is a $15 million option bonus due to Deebo Samuel on March 22nd. So roughly 6 weeks from now and soon after free agency starts. And I'm sure the Niners don't want to pay out that bonus. If the Niners just decide to release him before March 22nd and they designate him a post-June 1st release, it saves San Francisco $5 million each in 2025 and 2026 on the cap. But there would be a $10 million, from what I've read through multiple sources, a $10 million dead cap hit in 2025 and a $20 million cap hit in 2026. Although, when you look at Spotrac and overthecap.com and you go to 2026, right now, Deebo he's not under contract for 2026. There was a void year built into his contract, which is void years are essentially placeholder years where you can put cap hits for a player, but the assumption is at some point you're going to renegotiate and extend that player. So whatever that large cap hit is on the void year, it goes away and gets spread out or pushed out to later years. With Deebo being traded or not on the team, say he's outright released sometime before March 22nd as a June 1st cap cut, they as a post-June 1st cap cut, they cannot do it any other way. They take too big of a hit. I don't know what that $33 million void cap hit, what happens to that mathematically if he's traded. Now, what I think could help San Francisco out and potentially another team that's interested in Deebo is think about it in NBA terms, a sign and trade, where they figure out first, you figure out your trade partner, you figure out the trade compensation, and you work out the contract. But all that happens and is signed while he is in the extension, the restructure, the renegotiated contract. All that happens while he is still part of the 49ers. It helps the Niners cap, I'm guessing, the $33 million void year cap hit, and it still sets up the team acquiring Deebo to have low cap hits in the first couple years that he is part of the new team. From a financial standpoint, again, I don't know how a void cap hit goes away other than the player staying and you extending the contract. The reason why there is such a big void cap year hit is because they renegotiated Deebo's contract before the start of this past season and pushed money out into 2026. I'm wondering if a sign and trade, and again, it happens a lot in the NBA. I don't know if you hear it at all in the NFL, or maybe it is how you hear about a player who's open to a trade, but only if they get a new contract from the new team. And you saw it happen or not happen with Hassan Reddick, right? When he went from the Eagles to the Jets this year, missed out on a Super Bowl ring. And they didn't work out the contract in advance, and Reddick sat out all but the last 6 games of the season, something like that. If there's a framework in place while he's still with San Francisco, it may, and I'm going to say may because I'm not sure the ins and outs of what gets wiped away on a contract when it's redone, when you're trading a player. But that may be a partial solve to help the 49ers cap in 2026. Now, the bigger question is, what's his value? Or actually, maybe it's not the bigger question. A $33 million cap, it's a big ass question in 2026. Second biggest question, what's his value? What are you going to get from him in a trade? If Deebo, and I don't think this is going to happen, but if he played out his last year under contract in 2025 and hit free agency, the 49ers may get a third or fourth round compensatory pick at worst for him. So you can look at it, and if you want to be a really stingy negotiator, you can say, well, I'm not going to trade Deebo for anything. It's got to be at least a third, if not a third plus, or a second round pick. You're not getting a second round pick. You're probably not getting a third. Maybe you get a fourth. But he's, again, 29, going to be 30. Lot of wear on the tires, physical player, not necessarily a pure wide receiver, more of a gadget wide receiver. Our team's going to line him up as running back as much as Kyle did the past couple of years. Maybe if he gets somewhere like a Miami or potential, I don't know, a Minnesota or Cleveland, some sort of creative offensive play caller that can play to Deebo's strengths, because pure wide receiver is not it. We've watched his career. We've watched every game the last 2 seasons. Obviously, route running, great with the ball in his hands, right? Is he going to be a kick returner for some teams in addition to wide receiver duty? What is that going to be worth for a player approaching 30, had one great year, but here, from his rookie year on, here are his receiving numbers: 800 yards, 390 in an injury-marred COVID season in 2020, 1,400 bounce-back year, contract year, then 630, 890, and 670. I always thought, well, if there was an avenue for Deebo to have a bounce back year, maybe it is this year. Ayuk's hurt. It's a contract year. Players are all in contract years, especially when it's the last time basically a player is going to get a big contract. What if he gets a contract, 30, 31, 32? Maybe he gets a moderate contract at 33, but he might be done by then. And there's no harm in that. That would be a 10-year career, 9 or 10-year career. Now, Deebo is a very good football player, a dynamic football player, but he's not a very good wide receiver, right? If you take out, you can't just say if you take out the 1,400 yards, but let's just say you do, and you take out the injury-plagued season, he's basically a 750-yard receiver. I'm not saying you can find that anywhere, but I'm not worried about the running back carries. Hopefully McCaffrey is healthier than this season. Same with Garendo. If they re-sign a Patrick Taylor or someone in the draft or someone else in free agency to be running back 3 or 4, they're probably going to carry 3 and probably 2 on the practice squad. I'm not worried about the gadget player. They can find that. Right? I don't know if someone like Laviska Shenault, Seattle, same kind of player. Deebo's a better player, but we're saying the same kind of player. Can play some receiver, can play kick returner. You can do the end arounds, the bubble screens, the handoffs. And I'm not saying that's the solve. I'm just saying you could probably find a player like that in the draft, because Kyle's not going to give any rookie receiver a heavy snap count year one, but you find packages, right? Maybe it's Jacob Cowing. At some point, he's got to see the field. And if the Ayuk and Deebo aren't available to start the season or aren't on the active roster, somebody's got to step up. I am worried just about the familiarity with the system, the chemistry with Brock, going into a bounce back year where you're down Ayuk for the first 6-ish weeks. I think that's the only thing I'm worried about. But in terms of the numbers, replicating the numbers, I'm not completely worried about it. At some point, Ayuk is going to come back. Juwan Jennings, if he didn't get thrown out of the last game of the season, or no, he was thrown out of the Lions game and was suspended for the next game. He would have went over 1,000 yards. So, oh no, I'm sorry. He was either way. Yeah, he missed the game. I'm getting confused if he got thrown out of the suspended for the Lion game or the Cardinal game last game. You saw what he can do when given more opportunities. Pearsall, year 2. Cowing, year 2. Big question mark. Even a question mark for Pearsall, even though he came on the last couple of weeks of the season. I'm not worried about replacing Deebo's production. It's more the threat of Deebo. Deebo as a kick returner. Deebo with the ball in his hands. It's almost like the mystique of Deebo is more exciting as a fan and probably as a teammate and fearsome on the other side of the ball than what he's actually been producing the past couple of years. So Deebo potentially going out, and there's been trade speculation of other receivers, which was ridiculous, really ridiculous at the time before Deebo made this request. I still think it's ridiculous, but it's mildly more palatable. Davante Adams is going to be gone from the Jets. Now, the Jets, I think yesterday or over the weekend, Aaron Glenn basically said no to Aaron Rodgers. They're going to want to have a fresh start. They're going to release him or maybe even try to trade him. I don't know if someone's going to want Aaron Rodgers for a year. But Davante Adams went to New York because of Rodgers, and the Jets are going to be in a full-blown rebuild. We'll see who comes in at, they need a bridge quarterback. Do they draft a quarterback? Does someone fall to them? Do they take someone in the second round? It's got to be a rebuild. It's considered a rebuild right now until you have a viable option at quarterback. Adams is going to want to go. The question is, do they release him? He has no guaranteed money left on his contract, or do they try to trade Davante Adams? Adams played at Fresno State. It's a California guy. Said he would be open to playing with San Francisco, among other teams like the Rams. Is Davante Adams an option? Let me just say no. And I'm going to say no to the next couple, and we'll talk about it. The reason why is, again, you cannot pay, in my opinion, to have 2 high-priced players at a certain position. There needs to be some sort of balance throughout your roster, or if you want to go heavy somewhere, you're going to sacrifice someplace else, or you need to adopt the Philadelphia Eagles model where you have the high-priced quarterback, high-priced 2 receivers, high-priced running back, bringing in Saquon Barkley, but then it's a really young defense between Jalen Carter and a couple other Georgia players, Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell at corner. Yes, they do have Darius Slay. They do have the one safety that I'm blanking on his name. They have some players being paid, but they don't have a tight end getting paid a lot. They don't have a middle linebacker getting paid a lot, a defensive end in Nick Bosa getting paid a lot, a left tackle getting paid as much as Trent Williams. The Niners are a top-heavy team, and the reason why it's no to all these players that I'm going to discuss is I am aware of how much talent San Francisco has on the team already, right? When you rattle off Purdy's going to get paid, you have Williams, you have Kittle, you have IU coming back, you have McCaffrey, Pooney's played well, going to be a second-year player, Pearsall, Jennings, obviously you have Bosa, you have Floyd, you have Warner, you have Demo and Green, Mustafa is an ascending player. There's talent. But a lot of those people that I mentioned outside of the rookies, that's expensive talent. And you can't keep acquiring expensive talent when we saw what happens when injuries hit this team. And it's still a concern for me. 2020, 2024, how when injuries hit, it goes so bad. There was still too much talent left on the field healthy throughout the course of the season. Yes, there was pockets of time where they missed Ayuk for a large pocket of time and Deebo for a game or two. And same with Jennings, and Bosa missed a couple of games, and Williams. And there was some overlap for sure, but there's still remains a good amount of talent that this should have been an 8 or 9 win team. I still stand by that. But it goes so to shit like it did in 2020 that you got to stay away from top heavy stuff. Right? This isn't Hooters. Right? You could have a couple of those, but you need some flat chested. You need some B cups as well, right? You can't all be so top heavy. So no to Devontae Adams. T. Higgins, I mean, I think the Bengals need to do everything in their power to bring them back. The Bengals are a cheap organization. You saw what Joe Burrow can do coming off the wrist injury with not really much of a running game, but Chase having a huge year, Higgins having a nice year, getting some productivity out of the tight end position. Defense was terrible. Running back by committee. What does Joe Burrow and that offense look like without T. Higgins? Now they can maybe bring someone in at half the price or a third of the price, a quarter of the price, and get half the production, 3/4 of the production. It's not a bad thing. Maybe they look in the draft again. But again, you can't bring in someone that expensive. Cooper Kupp, why would the Rams trade him in division? Unless they think he's completely washed, like what the Eagles did with Donovan McNabb, trading him to the then Washington Redskins. But I wouldn't, again, I just don't want a part of another high-priced player. Even with Deebo gone, even with Ayuk on the mend, the Niners can't sustain that. And you know Brock is getting paid. And there was a report from Dan Graziano earlier on in this past week of, well, there's been some discussion now that, don't be surprised if Brock gets about $55 million a year. No shit. Why are we surprised by that? Mike Florio and Super Bowl Rose saying, oh, I'd make Brock play out the final year of his contract. Would I give him 30, 35 million a year? Maybe. Yeah. You'd give Brock Purdy, an MVP finalist, and someone who's in the Super Bowl last year, went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes, left the game in the fourth quarter and in overtime with the lead. You'd give him less money than you offered Daniel Jones. And I'm tired. I don't mean to get off on a tangent on the whole. Well, who are they bidding against? Who are they bidding against? Why do you have to give him $55 million? Who would give him $55 million? Well, it's just the fact that you have a franchise quarterback, someone that can perform in the playoffs, unlike a Lamar Jackson, who is a franchise talent, an elite talent, can't perform in the playoffs. Historically, CJ Stroud can't get past the divisional round. Jordan Love, 5 interceptions his last 6 quarters in the playoffs. Trevor Lawrence, Tua, these people are getting paid. So don't be surprised if Brock is 55. I'm not surprised, bro, because I have half a brain. And I know what the market is. I know what his comparable players are getting. It's just a question of, is he going to reset the market? And all of us collectively that say it, no, he shouldn't. The only ones that should are Mahomes, Jackson, Allen, and Burrow. And maybe Allen reworks his deal in the offseason to reset the market, because it certainly shouldn't be Dak and it shouldn't be Brock. Myles Garrett, the last one, obviously not a receiver. Can you imagine, Myles Garrett and Nick Bosa? And yeah, I could. It sounds great. And go do it in Madden. Knock yourself out. But again, that's going to cripple, in a way, your team everywhere else. And Brock's going to cripple the team everywhere else too. Okay. In a way, right? If you give X amount of money to Peter, you can't give Y or Z amount of money to Paul or John or Jane or whoever it's going to be, right? There are trade-offs. But do you want to compound diminishing salary cap space on a team that has a lot of talent, but also has some needs, starters and depth to fill with one player? The Niners' luck, it turns into an Anthony Davis trade where Garrett comes in, gets hurt his first game or hurt first training camp practice, and is out for a month. That's actually more realistic than the Niners pulling off a trade to begin with, right? I'm not even trying to be sarcastic, very pessimistic, but Christ, we know the injury history of this team. It all sounds good. And I've been on enough Reddit message boards or 49er websites where anytime anyone of note is released, the immediate outcry is, oh, got to sign him. Got to bring him in. Even if he's washed, got to bring him in. And I'm not saying Myles Garrett is. Not at all. And he's a better player than Nick Bosa. Myles Garrett is a game wrecker. Nick Bosa is someone you have to game plan around. If you ask for me to pick one, I'm going to take Myles Garrett. So do you want to trade Bosa for Garrett with some draft picks? We can have that discussion. But Garrett's going to want a new contract, and he's going to want more than what Nick Bosa got. So now you're in another position of bringing in somebody, maybe paying them more than you want to or more than they're worth, and you just did that with Trent Williams last offseason, and McCaffrey gets a pay bump and he gets hurt. I mean, it's just bad luck, right? There is some luck aspect to this. Chiefs, relatively healthy team. Eagles, relatively healthy team. 2 left standing in the Super Bowl. So no to any of these trades. The only trade that's going to be happening is Deebo. But let's just go back to there's no rush. There's no rush to trade him in February. There's no rush to trade him in mid-March. There is a date that you can shoot for, March 22nd, that $15 million option bonus. But San Francisco can still give him that bonus. I wouldn't advise this. And you can still wait until after the draft, after OTAs, sometime after June 1st to trade him. And you'll save $5 million on the cap, although I don't know with that option bonus coming due, how that changes the numbers. There's no rush. Any of these players, guys, the only one that's going to get released immediately is Javon Hargrave. And John Lynch came out and said that. Anybody else that could potentially save money as a release, it's all a post-June 1st release. There's no, even when June 1st hits, there's no, let me get rid of Leonard Floyd and save $6 million. Why? Why? Who knows who's going to get hurt in OTAs or training camp or preseason? You got to get to 90 men on your roster. You might as well save any cuts that may give you a decent chunk of change, $4, $5, $6 million until final cuts, right? You have to do what's best for your organization. Now, the Niners are doing Javon Hargrave a solid, releasing him early. I mean, they already saved, 10, 15 plus $1 million when they reduced his salary, and they're going to save another 3, designate him as a post-June 1st cut. But they don't have to do that for everybody. So no to trading 4 players. Yes to trading Deebo. And if they get it, again, trading before June 1st, $31.5 million dead cap hit is a sign and trade the answer. Got 6 weeks and probably, 5 more podcasts or maybe less if they decide to really accelerate this. But again, there's no rush. The Niners, they don't have an obligation to get the Purdy deal done first, but they should get the Purdy deal done first. Then maybe you turn your attention to free agency for the first week or two. Who do you want to sign? And then to Deebo. But, they've given Deebo's agent permission to seek a trade. So his agent is having discussions. His agent's probably having discussions about compensation and about a new contract. So it's not like the Niners have to do much. They just have to agree to something. I don't think Lynch is really the one picking up the phone here. So things can work in parallel, right? Purdy, other free agents, Deebo trade, etc. Let's quickly touch upon Gus Bradley joining the coaching staff. I think this is huge. I think in a way, this is almost as big as Robert Saleh joining the staff as defensive coordinator. Why? Because Gus Bradley is Robert Saleh insurance. Gus Bradley runs the cover 3. Kyle Shanahan interviewed Gus Bradley when he came aboard in 2017 to be the defensive coordinator. And I forget what team he went to, but D coordinator experience with the Colts most recently, with the Seahawks. He was the head coach of the Jaguars. This is a defensive coordinator that with a year in this, and I'm sure they signed him for more than 1 year. I think The discussion had to have been, hey, Gus, come on board. And you're trading Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley for Robert Saleh and Gus Bradley. Humongous upgrade, in addition to obviously getting a new special teams coordinator as well. The discussion with Gus Bradley had to be, come on board. Saleh's obviously the DC. You have experience calling plays the last couple of years, have experience in the cover three, want you to learn the system. And if Saleh goes anywhere in 2026 or 2027, we're promoting you. Like, you are the DC in waiting. And I think that is so big, because my biggest worry, and I'm sure a lot of fans also, was what happens if Saleh's gone, if it's a one and done. If they get a ring next year, I think it's worth it. But again, if that defense in 2026 falls off a cliff, that ring is going to be forgotten by midseason, right? I don't know, with certain level-headed fans, knee-jerk fans, off-the-rocker fans, it's going to vary how much a ring is going to placate fans. And who knows what happens with Vic Fangio, and the Eagles. I haven't heard anything. Does he retire? He got his ring? I mean, does he come back? He's from the Philly area. Kellen Moore's gone. He's going to be the Saints head coach. That offense is going to look different. Right? This is not just an automatic, Philadelphia is going to be they have free agents and stuff. Coordinators obviously matters. You saw what the Eagles were their Super Bowl year 3 years ago when they lost to the Chiefs, lost both coordinators, started out good, was an absolute mess, flamed out against Tampa in the playoffs, bring in 2 different coordinators. Boy, it matters. And obviously, having a really good draft, free agency, Saquon Barkley, all that good stuff matters too. But Gus Bradley, I'm calling him, he's the heir apparent to Robert Saleh. Do we think Robert Saleh is going to be Kyle Shanahan, Steve Spagnuolo, that he's going to be here for, 6, 7, 8 years? I don't. Next coaching cycle, he's going to be throwing his hat in the ring. And if the Niners defense bounces back, and you're going to see, obviously, again, his energy on the sidelines, they're going to be revamping that defense as best they can in free agency in the draft. Robert Saleh, unless the Niners plateau defensively, is going to be a hot coaching candidate next year. And even then, if they plateau and stay close to the same, and they're not a top 5 unit across the board, or whatever metrics you want to give vast improvement for the defense, he's still going to be, I think, a hot coaching candidate. If nothing else, you look at what he did with San Francisco, his first tenure, couple years of experience, 3 years of experience with the Jets, and how the Jets defense completely fell off a cliff after he got fired. Gus Bradley, welcome to San Francisco, Santa Clara. Glad you're there. Not that I'm sleeping better at night, but there is a succession plan. Now, could Gus Bradley leave? Say Saleh stays in 2026. Could Gus Bradley leave in 2026 for a D coordinator position? Sure. But for now, you got to feel good about it. Now, lastly, last podcast, which was 2 weeks ago, I apologize, no podcast this previous week. Whole family dealing with a stomach bug. Between my youngest one started it off, then me, then my oldest one had it. Between like 24, 48 hours, our dog even vomited. I don't know if there was a sympathy throw up or what. My wife survived, knock on wood, and she's always historically had an iffy stomach, so figure that one out. But just wasn't up to it last week, and wanted to save it for post Super Bowl anyway. But 2 weeks ago, went over who's on the defense going into the 2025 season, position by position. Let's do the same thing on offense. In an upcoming podcast, I'm going to be ranking the Niners offensive free agents and defensive free agents in terms of priority, who they should bring back. We're not going to do that now. Here is who is signed under contract for 2025. At quarterback, it's Brock Purdy and Tanner Mordecai. So free agents being Brandon Allen and Josh Dobbs. So there was some rumblings last week, I'm sure you saw it, that Josh Dobbs didn't have anything negative to say about San Francisco, although he did think that he won the backup QB competition in camp. I thought he did also, and that it was more politics that caused Brandon Allen to be the backup. Of course, that's a possibility. It might have been more Shanahan comfort level in terms of Brandon Allen having an extra year in the system over Josh Dobbs, but it's just Purdy and second-year player Tanner Mordecai. Now, there's been a lot of course, anti-Purdy people out there thinking that, oh, well, the Niners, and you see mock drafts, people doing stupid stuff. The Niners drafting a quarterback in the second round, well, whether it's Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss or Dylan Gabriel from Oregon in like a mid to later round. And some of these people actually think that Kyle Shanahan will be okay with a rookie as the backup to Purdy. There is zero chance. Now, is there a chance that they draft a quarterback with, say, a 6th or 7th round pick or an undrafted rookie free agent? Sure. Right? At that point, 6th, 7th round pick, Flyers, right? They have 1 6th round pick, 2 7ths. I mean, I still rather see, you go, depth on the O-line, maybe another linebacker, and we're going to get into the draft as we get closer to draft season. But I think there's the real, possibility that Tanner Mordecai stays on the 53, but as QB3. And someone between Purdy and Mordecai, Joe Flacco was mentioned. Someone like a Mac Jones is a possibility with the Jaguars now after he was traded from New England. I don't know if someone like a Bailey Zappi is under contract with New England. Daniel Jones, where is he going to end up? They're not going to bring back Jimmy G, of course. There is going to be a veteran backup to Brock Purdy. Now, Flacco is a winner, right? Like you saw him, with the Colts and with the Browns, leading the Browns to the playoffs last year. Like he been in the league long enough, still has a good arm, smart guy. I think he would be a good backup for some teams. I don't know about this team the way the offensive line is currently, right? If you're going to pay Purdy $55 million, you have to allocate some resources, draft picks or otherwise, to protect him. And the Niners have come out and said that they don't, not that they don't prioritize the O-line. When you look at the number of draft picks they invested, it was a first-round pick in Mike McGlinchey, didn't resign him to a second contract. The amount that they spent on Trent Williams, they've brought in free agents at center, whether it was Weston Richburg or Alex Mack, most recently Jake Brendel, and then they signed Matt Hennessy from the Falcons practice squad, who they seemed like who might be battling for that center position. They have to protect him, and I don't know if at least Purdy has mobility. At least Josh Dobbs has mobility. Tanner Mordecai has some mobility. Mac Jones has more mobility than Joe Flacco. I don't know where they end up at in terms of a backup quarterback, but it's not going to be a rookie as a number 2. Do they make a draft pick that to challenge Mordecai for number 3? Sure, why not? Who the hell's Tanner Mordecai at the end of the day? And is it still out of the realm of possibility that they bring in 2 veterans to back up Purdy? Sure. If you can get a veteran for $200,000-$300,000 more than what you would pay Tanner Mordecai, you can do that, right? And have them battle it out. And as long as there's not a lot of guaranteed money involved, sure. But 2 QBs under contract. Offensive linemen, I think you'd be surprised to hear 11 offensive linemen are signed so far. At tackle, you have Trent Williams, Colton McKivitz, Sebastian Gutierrez, and Jalen McKenzie, who was a late pickup end of the season. At center, Jake Brendel, Matt Hennessy, who I mentioned earlier, and Drake Nugent. Guard, Dominic Puny, Spencer Burford, Nick Sakiel, Zachary Johnson, again, another late pickup, and who was signed to a futures contract. And they have 1 exclusive rights free agent, tackle Austin Pleasance, who got some play the last week of the season at left tackle, rotating in with Charlie Heck. He was the really large dude with the long hair. All they have to do is tender him a contract, non-guaranteed, if they decide to do so. He comes to camp. He can come to camp as part of the 90-man roster, but the Niners, could release him sometime before that. So real quick, obviously the line needs work, right? Obviously the line needs work. Learnings from the Super Bowl yesterday, right? The trenches matter. We're going to get into defense, and I discussed defense 2 weeks ago, but the lines matter. The Chiefs' O-line, which a couple years ago was one of the strengths of their offense, was not the case, obviously, yesterday. And they've had some struggles. They had to move Joe Thuney out from left guard to left tackle. The Eagles D-line completely manhandled the Chiefs. What was it? 6 or 7 sacks. And this is a true statement. Vic Fangio did his best Nick Sorensen impersonation yesterday because he didn't blitz at all. This was the vision. What the Eagles did to the Chiefs, that's the vision that Kyle and John have for this team. A dominant front four that caused you to not blitz, in the case of the Super Bowl, at all, and wreak havoc. It's what the Bucs did when Tom Brady was the quarterback and they beat Patrick Mahomes, although, Todd Bowles was sending blitzes at him. But that's the vision, right? Cover 3, drop 7, get there with 4. Did not have to blitz at all. This O-line needs work. And I think where people are going to be surprised is I'm not sure. There's a lot of talk about, what is it, Drew Dahlman Drew Dahlman, Chris Dahlman, former Niner offensive lineman's son, center for the Atlanta Falcons, that the Niners should target him. All this stuff sounds good, just like NBA free agency. Remember however many years ago, Kevin Durant, the Knicks are saving their money for Kevin Durant or LeBron James in the summer of 20, whatever it was. It's all horse shit. It's a wish at that point, thinking that they're not going to re-sign with their team. And anything that we're talking about now, and Dahlman has come up a bunch, you got to wait to see if the Falcons are going to re-sign him or not. And if they don't, do you think the Niners are going to spend $10 million just a year on a center? They got Mack at the end of his career relatively cheap. Weston Richburg was not a big contract, coming over from the Giants at the time, and then blew out, I think, his patellar tendon and never really played or didn't really play all that much, had knee issues with San Francisco. And Jake Brendel has been okay or worse, but again, a cheap contract. Do you think they're going to spend 3 to 4 times as much on a free agent center as they're doing currently at center? And if you want to say, well, you got to do that because you got to get better at Jake Brendel. Yeah, that's your opinion, but it might not be Kyle and John's or Chris Forrester's philosophy of where they're going to spend money on offense. That's why Matt Hennessy is here, and he might be the starting center if he beats Jake Brendel out. Drake Nugent has no chance. Another one of those vaunted training camp heroes, undrafted rookie free agent out of Michigan this past season. But I think people are going to be disappointed with how many outside the organization new starters are going to be on the line. It literally might be one. Because Matt Hennessy's with the organization. Say the Niners take a tackle at 11. Say any defensive ends, defensive tackles that they like are gone. Could they potentially go safety if Hufunga's not re-signed? Sure. But there does need to be some succession planning for Trent Williams. And he has given no indication that he wants to retire. He said he wants to play out this next contract, so it would be this year in 2026. And if he retires, he obviously leaves, a good amount of money on the table. But let's say they draft a tackle that's better than McKivitz and starts at day 1. Then you could potentially move McKivitz to left guard in place of Aaron Banks. And if Matt Hennessy beats out Jake Brendel, he's your center. So you have a different looking line, potentially. Trent Williams, Colton McKivitz, Matt Hennessy, Dominic Pooney, and a draft pick at tackle. But that's not the overhaul that I think most 49er fans are wanting or expecting. And I don't think it's going to be that. Hell, Spencer Buford or Nick Zakiel might get a crack, and they're both only under contract for this last year, 2025. They're going to get a crack at the left guard position. They could bring someone like a Charlie Heck back as the swing tackle, right? I don't know. I really don't know how many beyond these 11 players that are signed right now, and they're going to carry 9. They should draft 2 players. They should draft someone who could play guard tackle and someone who could play guard and maybe have some center flexibility, because Burford and Zakiel and Hennessy and McKivitz are free agents after this season. And the Niners have been good drafting a player a year early, knowing that they have, or drafting a player knowing that they have free agents coming up in a following year. Drafting Jair Brown and Malik Mustafa because Hufunga's a free agent. Drafting Jalen Graham and D. Winters because Greenlaw's a free agent. Drafting Renardo Green because Charvarius Ward's a free agent and isn't coming back. That same mentality should be applied to the offensive line. They should. People that have mock drafts that have 4 offensive line or even 3, not happening, guys. Not happening. 2 at the most. And a mid-tier, low-cost free agent can come in as well at either guard, tackle, center. I don't think Drew Dahlman, I just don't see them spending that much money, is going to come in as well. So you may have 3 or 4 new players outside the 11 that they have now in the O-line, but that doesn't mean you might have 3 new starters out from outside the organization. Tight end, 2 on the roster currently, George Kittle and Mason Pline. Undrafted rookie free agent last year out of Furman. They do have Jake Tonjes as an exclusive rights free agent. Again, you tender him. No harm, no foul. So you may have 3 on the roster. They should draft somebody. Now, Kittle's going to get extended. I think Kittle said that they're in talks to extending him, and they should. One, he's still a top 3 tight end in the league and still probably the best overall tight end in the league. How much more he has on the tires at 31 years old. I mean, you can extend him for 2 to 3 years. 25, 26, 27, maybe 28. Obviously, Kyle has a tight end 2 problem. Doesn't matter who you bring in. It's still a problem. So I think you have these 3 come into camp and you bring in another 3, whether it's 1 through the draft and 2 free agents. I don't know if they're going to be bringing back anybody else that was, on the team at tight end. I don't think they got a whole lot out of it. I'm blanking on, I apologize, the person that was the de facto tight end 2 this year. They can do better. They said they miss Charlie Warner, his blocking. So you could see it could be Kittle. It could be a rookie. If they carry 3, Kittle, a rookie who's maybe more of a receiver but can block, and then your 3rd tight end or 2nd tight end, however you want to look at it, somebody that is more of a blocking specialist. It's not going to be Braden Willis, right? Nobody, I don't think anybody like that is going to be brought back. They do need at least 2 new faces that could be in serious consideration to be the 3 on the roster. But you got to bring in even more for camp and see how it's going to sort itself out behind Kittle. Now, running backs on the roster right now, McCaffrey, Guerendo, and Israel Abanikanda, who they signed from the Jets practice squad the last month of the season, didn't really see any playing time. I'm going to get into free agents. So obviously, Jordan Mason's a free agent. We'll talk about that next podcast or 2 when I get into ranking the free agents. Eli Mitchell's a free agent. Patrick Taylor's a free agent. So Guerendo's 2nd-year player is next year in 2025 will be a 2nd-year player. I think the same with Abanikanda, or maybe a 3rd-year player potentially. Hasn't gotten a lot of run. I don't imagine this being the 3. I don't know if they would go 4. They would probably have 3 on the 53 and 1 or 2 on the practice squad. Patrick Taylor, if Kyle Shanahan and who did he have calling the plays against Arizona? Clay Kubiak. If nothing else, he got Patrick Taylor to be a 100-yard rusher against Arizona. A non-guaranteed contract, you can bring him in. Could it be a late round draft pick? No earlier than the 6th, because right now they don't have a 5th round draft pick. They have more pressing needs in the 4th or earlier for sure than running back. But you can bring in, a 6th or 7th round or undrafted rookie free agent. You can bring Patrick Taylor back if you want. You can bring some sort of a free agent, veteran free agent in, and maybe even someone like Eli Mitchell, very low cost, you can bring in as a non-guaranteed contract to compete for the 90-man roster. Again, we're going to go through priority of offensive free agents in either next week's podcast or the week after. But the Niners, I don't think have, and anybody out there, I mean, should the Niners draft Boise State running back Austin Genty at 11? No! Are you fucking kidding me? Well, he could be a good compliment to McCaffrey. There is no compliment to McCaffrey in Shanahan's mind. When McCaffrey's healthy, he's going to get 90% of the snaps. Do I agree with that? No. And coming off this year with 2 injuries, the bilateral Achilles tendonitis and the knee sprain, that's not a guarantee that he's going to get hurt again this year, but why not? Grendo fared well, showed some receiving, right, skills, showed some hands. Not as much of a power back as you would think at his size. Does have some home run speed. You could maybe, I don't want to say limit, but if McCaffrey was going to get 25 touches a game, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 15 carries and 5 receptions. And Guarendo gets the other 5 to 10 carries, 5 to 8 carries, right? I don't think there's a much of a drop off. Shouldn't say that. There's a drop off between McCaffrey and Guarendo, of course, but I don't think it's worth keeping McCaffrey out there. I mean, Christ, Barkley got over 2,000 yards, and I still think the backup running backs got more carries this year than backup running backs got for McCaffrey last year when he was the offensive player of the year. Not a ton to be done at running back, and not a lot that should be invested pick-wise or financially because of how Shanahan does not rotate running backs unless there's injury. You can't predict injury, or you can't guarantee injury, but you should be able to plan for it, right? And you should have a number 2 or number 3 that you trust to either share the workload, spell McCaffrey, or if McCaffrey's going to be out. Now, receiver right now, 9 on the roster, and your first 2 are not going to be there in September. Ayuk, Deebo, Jennings, Pearsall, Cowing, Isaiah Hodgins, Russell Gage, Trent Taylor signed to a future contract along with Tariq Owens. Now, offensively right now, Isaiah Hodgins and Russell Gage are such sneaky sleepers to make an impact on this team. And I think they were signed with a purpose. They're not guaranteed to make the roster, but knowing Ayuk was going to miss time, having some sort of sense that Deebo's future might be up in the air, just not knowing Deebo was going to be the one to push it. Russell Gage has been a starter in this league, or at the worst, a number 3, right? At the worst. And Isaiah Hodgins has played some valuable time for the Giants. The most important thing that they are to Kyle are veterans. Because we could say, well, if Deebo gets traded before the draft and Ayuk's obviously going to be hurt, well, they got to draft a receiver sometime early. No. I mean, I know we were all surprised by the Pearsall pick, and then they went, Cowing, in the mid round. So they doubled down, expecting some sort of choice had to be made about one of their receivers. I don't think they knew that it was going to be ACL, MCL tear in one and requesting a trade in another. I didn't think they thought both would be gone for the month of September. But you have 3 on the roster. You have 9, but really 7 on the roster. But a rookie coming in, even if they draft one in the first round, which they won't, even if they draft one in the second round, which they won't, even if they draft one with one of their 2 third-round picks, which I doubt, Kyle's not going to play them. Kyle has a much better chance playing Isaiah Hodgins or Russell Gage over any rookie that he could potentially draft or an undrafted rookie free agent. So they become super important as potentially receivers 3 and 4 or 3 and 5 if Cowing's going to be receiver number 4. You know what I mean? Like if your top 5 going into the season is Jennings, Pearsall, Cowing, Hodgins, and Russell Gage in some sort of order. It's not great. Don't get me wrong, but could they tread water for a month, 5-6 weeks, until IU comes back? Now, could there be a rookie that they draft 4th, 6th, 7th round that makes some sort of an impact? Sure. Would I bet on it? No. Could there be a free agent that they bring in? Again, low-cost free agent on a 1-year, maybe even a 2-year deal. Who knows? And I don't know who these players are. I haven't done the research yet. But could someone come in and help out that rotation at the top or be in the mix for receiver 3? Because I'm sure 1 and 2 are Jennings and Pearsall, right? And they don't go 3 wide a ton because you have McCaffrey and you have Kittle. But Russell Gage is a number 3. Not terrible. Now, he hasn't played since 2022, so he's been working his way back from a patellar tendon injury or a serious knee injury. But he was on the practice squad for a good amount of last season. They wouldn't have put him there if he couldn't play or couldn't run. So I'm tepid, lukewarm, okay with the receivers now, right? Knowing Deebo's not going to be on the roster, assuming that, and Ayuk's not coming back till probably week 6 or 7. Could it be better? Sure. Just a matter of how's it going to get better. And I don't think it gets better early in 2025 with a rookie. It might with a free agent, just a matter of who. And it's not going to be, if Devontae Adams gets released and he wants to play for the 49ers, I'm not saying you have to take a vet minimum deal, but they got to figure something out. They have to figure something out. Is DeAndre Hopkins an option? 32, 33? As some sort of a savvy veteran, like in the Chris Conley mold. Doesn't have the speed Chris Conley does. I don't imagine Conley's going to be back, but is it an option? Sure. A lot of things are options. I don't know how probable it is. But work to be done at receiver as well. So let's conclude there. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening routine. Not sure who you guys in Niner land were rooting for yesterday, Eagles or Chiefs. I was actually rooting for the Chiefs. It's cool to see history. And if anybody's going to say, I don't want the Chiefs to get a 3-peat because the Niners didn't, I don't care about that. I don't know any Chiefs fans. Actually, my younger son likes the Chiefs, but he didn't even watch the Super Bowl. He likes them because he knows that they're good. Living in the Northeast, having to potentially hear or deal with some Philly fans. And there's a couple that I know that are friends and good people, but for the most part, it's a despicable fan base, and Nick Sirianni still has a punchable face, whether he's Italian or not, just like I am. So that was a bummer, on top of the fact that it was just a complete garbage game, right? But we're into almost mid-February, 28-day month. Maybe something happens with Kittle or Brock in the coming week or weeks. And we'll have obviously plenty more Niners stuff to discuss in the upcoming weeks. And as I mentioned earlier, breaking down the Niners free agents and my ranking them priority-wise on who they should let go, maybe bring back, or potentially bring back. I'm going to do offense 1 week, defense the other, which will lead us up, hopefully, into the start of free agency. But again, that concludes the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Next week, we'll be back probably again earlier in the week. If anything happens, Brock Purdy-wise or contract-wise, there might be a quick podcast later on in the week. But between now and when we speak again, stay happy, healthy, and safe. We'll talk soon. Take care, all.